we're going to talk about the early 19th century art movement known as Romanticism. Like the beginning of the 18th century, Romanticism is a Rubenist movement where we use color and emotion in art. But unlike the early 18th century in Rococo, where everything is lighthearted and largely centered on the idea of wealthy people enjoying themselves or having a good time, Romanticism embraces art from the other direction. It's often intensely emotional, and rather than focusing on more pleasant emotions, it often focuses on horror and the macabre, the gruesome or grotesque. The period of the early 19th century is an intensely emotional one in the first place. This is often called the Age of Sensibility. And if we read novels and other artifacts from this time, we can see that many characters, both men and women, openly express their emotions in the pages of art and in the pages of literature. And Romanticism embraces this trend as well. Some art historians explain this idea of Romanticism as a reaction to current events. So if we think about the end of the 18th century, we have the rise of the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror, and then Napoleon taking over many European countries on the continent. So this is a period of instability and disruption in Europe. And some Romantic painters seem to respond to that kind of political upheaval. That's what we see in Goya's The 3rd of May, 1808. Notice here that the date 1808 is part of the title. Goya doesn't actually paint this painting until about 6 years later in 1814. And what he's showing us in this painting is the invasion of Spain by Napoleonic soldiers. Goya pieces this scene together both from his own experiences and from stories he hears from friends and relatives after the fact. And what he shows us in this painting is a philosophical idea called the sublime. The sublime is a kind of overwhelming emotional response. And often when we talk about the sublime, we think about this older meaning of the word awesome. When we say something's awesome today, we often mean it's just very good. It's an intense form of the word good. However, the older definition of the word awesome meant something that evokes awe or evokes an overwhelming feeling. And that's what we're intended to feel when we look at this here. We're intended to be overwhelmed by the emotional plight of these Spanish civilians. Goya uses the kind of strong contrasts we see from earlier paintings. Like Caravaggio and some of his followers, we see a strong light source within the painting, casting light in a particular direction. But we also see that contrast pointed out in other ways. The French soldiers on the right-hand side are almost entirely dehumanized. We don't see their faces, we don't see their expressions. If they have emotions, they're hidden from us, the viewer. They seem almost like a kind of killing machine. In contrast, the Spanish civilians on the left-hand side show a wide variety of emotions. Obviously, the central figure who's about to be executed is wearing white, the color that's historically associated with innocence. And his position is intentionally referencing that of Christ on the cross. So again, reminding us of the innocence of these civilians. They haven't really done anything to deserve to be executed other than being, unfortunately, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And this picture really is a good summation of what we talk about when we talk about Romanticism. It's dramatic, it's emotional, it makes us feel a sense of overwhelming feeling or emotion, but that feeling or emotion is not always positive.